So if you're anything like me, the last week of YouTube uploads have been my favorite books of 2024, my least favorite books of 2024, most disappointing, whatever, and I'm addicted to them. Can't stop. I love them. It's my favorite time of year, and I'm always so jealous of everyone sharing and getting feedback that I've been fondly encouraged to record my own tier ranking video of all the books I read in 2024. It was a great reading year for me. I've been struggling to read last couple of years, reading way less than average, 15 to 20, which is still a good amount. But I usually read around 80 to 85, and I read 84 this year. So let's get into it. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just want to be frank that it's a miracle that you're even seeing this. This is a new channel. It's my first video. My name is Kate and I'm trying my best. And that's sort of the thesis statement for this entire effort. Before we get into it, I have to go through what the tiers are called. The top tier is going to be my top 10. Because I read so many great things, this top 10 is going to be a real challenge, and it's going to actually hurt my feelings to not put things up there. The second category is runners up. So these would have won in a different year had I not read so many great things. And so like in pageantry, you have your winner, you have your runners up, and then sometimes you have your Miss Congeniality. She's just there because she's nice, she's cute, she's a welcome part of the lineup. You know, we're glad we read her, but she's ultimately not a winner. But we don't regret. This next category, I've called it French fart noise. I will demonstrate. I live in France, my partner is French. I have a lot of French friends. This noise is quintessential to the French experience. It communicates both indifference and indecision, where it's, do you see anything on the menu you like? How was the movie? Is it gonna rain today? It's just, it's a great noise, and if you ask me about some of these books, my only response could be, so that's that category. The second to the last category is, that was it. This is mostly for, like, books that disappointed me. I was expecting more. I'm, like, sad that they're this low, but also stop disappointing me. My last category is, don't mention this around me. Don't mention this book around me, or you're gonna get a rant, and you don't want to rant. Everyone's gonna regret it. Just don't mention the book. For the sake of the video, we have to mention the book because that's the whole point, but I have beef with these books and I'm going to try to maintain some decorum. I don't want too much negativity to be a part of my digital footprint, so I will try to remain calm when discussing books in this category. I started the year with a book that I buddy read with my mom. We buddy read 5 books this year, and unfortunately we did not have great luck in our efforts. We started with reading The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. The movie came out, I guess, in 2023. My mom and I are big Hunger Games fans, but apparently she didn't know that this book existed until, like, the movie was gonna come out. So she bought us 2 copies, and we read them side by side. Well, from 4,000 miles apart, we read them side by side, and we hated it. Unfortunately, I was watching a lot of videos of people just, you know, saying that it reignited their passion for the series, or their passion for reading, or their passion for the genre. I unfortunately did not think it was that good. I honestly have a lot of trouble with Lucy Baird as a character, that she randomly breaks out into song. It's kind of cringe. It's unfortunately giving freshman high school theater student, which is even, like, crazier. I just thought the games were clumsy. I thought the whole thing was a little clumsy. I thought the movie was bad. And I don't relish in hating things. I really want to love them. I just didn't like this. And I'm so pissed about not liking it that I have to put it in the last category. Next book I have here is Furious Love. It's a biography of the marriage of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, who are 2 actors that I like, and they had a crazy marriage, and I think that their part of pop culture has been widely forgotten. Like, before there was Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, there was Dick and Liz. They, I mean, completely metastasized all of popular culture for like 10 years. Unfortunately, the book did lean a bit tabloid. I heard that this person said that this person said, and maybe they did this and maybe they did that. It felt a bit gossipy to the point that felt a little maybe insulting to the legacy of 2 great artists. So for that reason, even though I cried, I'm going to put it in Miss Congeniality, because I don't think it would have been a favorite even if I had read less books this year. Next I have a book called Priest Daddy. So it's going in French fart noise. It took me so long to read this. It took me like 2 years to read this book because I kept picking it up and putting it down. And the title, Priest Daddy, would make you think it's something else, but it actually really is a father who is a priest. Patricia Lockwood, her father, through some Christian loophole, there are many Christian loopholes, he became a Catholic priest while he was already married and had kids, and he's this eccentric character, and her mom's eccentric and her family's eccentric, and it's crazy and it's lunacy, and like the first third of the book you're having a great time, but then like the antics don't stop. It's just antics around the clock in a way that's more exhausting than it is entertaining. So I sort of skimmed the last like third of the book. I was getting too tired. Next I have The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, which is a book I read because Books on Lala read it and she seemed to be having a good time. I listened to it on audio while going to the gym, so not the best gym audio, but I thought it was very exciting. It's actually written by a paleontologist who actually discovered dinosaurs, so he's saying like, oh, I discovered this, and when I dug up the bone, I blah blah blah, which is a lot more interesting than like an academic discussing the works of other people. So that's sort of an interesting idea. It was fun, it was nice. I like dinosaurs. Miss Congeniality. Good poems for hard times. Not to give away how I was feeling in January and February, but I needed this book, and it was fine. There were some good poems in it. There were some not so good poems in it, and there are some poems that I don't think about at all. In fact, 99% of this book I don't really think about. So it's going in French fart noise because I just don't think it's essential. I read Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. This is my fourth Jane Austen, and I was expecting it to be more gothic because it's supposed to be her gothic novel. She mentions Anne Radcliffe, who is a famous gothic novelist. It's supposed to have this gothic feel. I wasn't getting that, and there was some drama in it that I found interesting, but ultimately I found it forgettable. Even though I love Jane Austen, it's just nothing has soared to the heights of Pride and Prejudice for me personally. I read Mr. Wilder and Me. This is Jonathan Coe. A professor gave me this book with a nice little note inside, so I did read it. This book is about like, it's a woman, she's helping Miss Billy Wilder make his last film, Fedora, in Greece. It's really inconsequential, essentially. I just thought that the female character was written kind of flatly. I didn't find anything very interesting except her interactions with the director. So I just felt like all that for what? Not very interesting. Unfortunately, that was it. And that was it. I read The Course of Love by Alain de Botton. He's like a contemporary philosopher, I guess. I think we've all seen his TED Talks and his little videos about relationships. I think is an interesting speaker, and this is his novel about love. He writes about love. It's a book about a couple. It's supposed to be about realistic love in the modern age. I just thought that it was not written very well. I think that he's a great nonfiction writer, but I just don't think he can write fiction all that well, and I was disappointed because I was hoping to like have some kind of revelation. Now I have Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. I would have given this 5 stars if I rated books on a 5-star scale, but I don't. At the beginning of the year, it was my favorite book that I had read at that point. So like in February and March. And I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I listened to the audiobook narrated by Meryl Streep, and I thought there's no way that anything is going to beat this. And then something beat it, and then something beat it again. And then unfortunately it's my 11th favorite book of the year, so it has to go in runners-up, but know that it does pain me that I have to put it there. What is it about? It's about, it's a woman who is sort of telling the story of how she used to date this famous actor while in a summer stock production of Our Town in northern Michigan. It's like about that period of time. It's about when they're currently living. I think they're in quarantine at the time. It is a COVID book, but it's done in a tasteful, interesting way. and I just thought it was really great. It was my first Ann Patchett, and I definitely want to read more of her. Year of the Monkey by Patti Smith. I love Just Kids by Patti Smith, which is her memoir about her relationship with Robert Mapplethorpe, who's her partner for a long time. And this was, I think it was like a collection of stories, a collection of essays, a collection of diary entries, essentially, over the period of 1 year. I think it was 2016. And if you see that I'm struggling to talk about it, it's because it wasn't that interesting. I love Patti Smith. I'm glad I read it ultimately, so I'm gonna put it in Miscongeniality, but ultimately I just didn't think it was anything of great consequence, but I did enjoy my time reading it. I just don't remember reading it. God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, which is, gosh, 4th, 5th, 6th book I've read by Kurt Vonnegut. It's something about a guy who's nice and his family's mean, and there's something about money, and I don't know. And he's a great writer. This book didn't stick with me. I'm going to reluctantly put it in Miscongeniality because I know I enjoyed myself, and sometimes you don't have to remember a book. No, I'm being silly. I should put it in French Fart Noise, and that really does pain me. And you know what? I'm putting Year of the Monkey down there too. I have to be realistic. I read 6 of the 8 Anne of Green Gables books this year. This was a highlight of the year for me, is reading these books. I took my little Kindle everywhere and was just constantly reading about Anne Shirley and her little shenanigans and her little scrapes that she gets into. She's a little orphan girl living in Prince Edward Island, and she's got friends and a love interest, and it's sad and it's happy and it's funny and it's great. I think that the first one ultimately is absolutely going in my top 10. It got me into reading more classic children's literature, classics in the middle grade area. I've read several more this year, and it brought me a lot of joy, actually. Just a lot of simple pleasure, which you need in life. I'll rate them all, I think. I think I'm gonna rank them all at the same time. I'm gonna put Miscongeniality for the 2nd and 3rd book, because I don't think they're quite in the runners-up category. I think I really enjoyed them. I think you only really need to read the first 3. You do not really need to read after them. The 4th one I was pretty disappointed by. It's epistolary. It's written later and then slotted into the chronology. The 5th one was fine, but ultimately not that interesting. I listened to Caitlin Doughty read Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. She's, what's her channel called? Ask a Mortician on YouTube. And I love her. I'm a great big fan. This is going in runners-up because it was absolutely interesting about death, the death industry, history of death, funeral history, her own personal history as a mortician. Betty. I feel we've got Don't Mention This Around Me at the bottom. I feel towards the top, you could also don't mention this book around me, because I will also not rant, but just gush about it for 5 minutes. So I'm going to keep it brief. Betty is the favorite book, the best book I've read this entire year. I think it's just absolutely fantastic. It's a semi-fictionalized account of Tiffany McDaniel's mother, Betty, and her life as mixed-race Native American girl in, southern Appalachian Ohio, and the violence that she faced, the violence that she witnessed, and how that shaped her as a person. I think it's, the story of a girl, it's a story of a family, a story of an area, and I think it was incredibly profound, but deeply emotionally disturbing, in a way that I'm still sort of recovering from it now. So tread lightly with Betty. I have Wuthering Heights. That was it. I really, hated this. I thought it was tremendously boring, and I love a classic. And this is supposed to be, an edgy girl standard that you love Wuthering Heights, but unfortunately, I didn't enjoy myself. I read 2 things by Claire Keegan, and I'm gonna put them both in French Fart Noise because I did not connect with them at all. I thought the writing style was a bit dry, a bit stilted. I didn't connect with it. It felt kind of slow. It felt... There you go. Great Circle. Great Circle is going up to the top 10. It's gonna be my number 2. So Great Circle is now number 2. Great Circle is the story of a female aviator and aviatrix, and her effort to circumnavigate the globe, her life from childhood to when she is said to have died on that journey. The other half of the story is a modern day woman who's preparing to play this aviatrix in a film, and it's rare that when a book goes back and forth like that, that both stories are equally interesting, but both stories are very interesting. And the way Maggie Shipstead makes the voice of each character on either side of this coin equally as compelling and equally as unique, I think is a feat of terrific writing. I'm bullying my mom into reading this. I might reread it. I just think that it's great. As I mean, I went to space camp. I had an Amelia Earhart book, and I, just was primed to love this. I read The Night Ocean because it was one of the book chemist's favorite books of 2023, and we have a similar reading style, and it's supposed to be like Call of Cthulhu-esque, very Lovecraftian, but it was sold to me in a way that made me feel like it was going to be more horror, that it was going to be honestly more interesting. I didn't think that this was that great. It really had me hooked in the first quarter and then just lost me. So I personally am very disappointed. I'm also disappointed with Convenience Store Woman. This is like, on the internet, people love this book. I personally don't get it. It's a woman and all she wants to do is work in a convenience store. She does not have any greater ambition. Yeah, she just wants to be left alone and work in her store and have a routine, which I appreciate. And I thought that I would enjoy the simplicity of that. But when you actually get into like the nitty-gritty details of the book and what's actually happening, I found it not interesting and in fact not enjoyable to read. I can't get into the specifics without spoiling, but just know that I'm personally disappointed. I read Educated by Tara Westover. I think I'm the last person on the planet to have read Educated by Tara Westover, so I feel like putting it in my top 10 is sort of, it's egg on my face. I should have read it years ago when everyone else was reading it. I've made an effort this year to read popular books because usually I don't. Educated, everyone knows what Educated is. She wasn't allowed to go to school as a kid, and she wrote this she self-educated herself. She wrote this memoir. She went to Oxford. She's very smart. It's critiques religious fundamentalism, which I appreciate. It's very good. It's well written. There we go. I read Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. This is my last Eugenides I had to read before reading all the novels on his backlist. He's got a short story collection as well, but I really love Jeffrey Eugenides. My favorite book I read 2023 was The Marriage Plot, and then I read The Virgin Suicides last year as well. And Middlesex is about it's a family generational saga about this recessive hermaphroditic gene and it being passed down ultimately to the main character, the protagonist of this novel, and how that individual lives with it. I thought it was great. I thought it was awesome. I think in any other year it would have made my top 10, but unfortunately I read so many great books this year that it is nudged out. I read The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating. A woman, she's chronic pain, her friend brings in this snail, puts it on her bedside, she finds meaning in the snail. It's a memoir. As you can tell, I don't care. I didn't care. I still don't care. Do I put it in That Was It or French Fart Noise? That was it, because I was honestly expecting a bit more. Speaking of books I was expecting literally anything at all from, The Memory Police. Everyone loves The Memory Police. This is the second book my buddy read with my mom, and we both really hated it. It's a Japanese society. You get the idea that it's maybe dystopian or post-apocalyptic, or something has happened in which the government has the ability to make certain objects disappear and everyone forgets them. Things like rubies, things like hair ribbons, things like books, etc. And with that description you might think that things happen in this book, but actually nothing happens in this book. The characters are flat, the writing is dry, maybe that's part of the translation, but I was extremely disappointed. I closed the book and I had a feeling of like, that was it. But it's not going in that category. It's going, don't mention this around me, because I am so pissed that I didn't like it. Because everyone else did, and I just want to be like the cool girls. I read The Pursuit of Love by Nancy Mitford. I have really nothing to say about this book. It's Nancy Mitford. She's one of the Mitfords, and I wanted to feel cultured. I wanted to read her book, but I guess upper crust, early 20th century English society is not that interesting to me, and there was not enough drama to keep me interested. French Fart Noise, because I do think it was kind of well written. Circe. I was reading books that everyone likes this year, and I was trying my best to also like them. Circe was like, it was fine. It felt like Forrest Gump, but Greek mythology, where you just sort of have one character run into everything significant that's ever happened. And the writing was fine, the characters were fine, I was kind of entertained, I like Greek mythology. It's going to Miss Congeniality. I have nothing against this book, but for me it was just fine. I'm not feral over it. I'm not frothing at the mouth like so many other of the girlies are, and I respect them, but I'm not one of them. I read No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. It's not quite a novel. It's more of a series of like tweets, I guess, a series of funny sentences, which, a bit like Pre-Study, are amusing in the beginning and they just become exhausting. I'm putting it in French Fart Noise here, that they can live together. Because I do think it is amusing if you like have it, it's gonna sound mean, if you have it like next to the toilet and you read like 5 a day and like get through the book at, you know, however often you're using the bathroom, that I think is the best environment for this book to live in, or like by a nightstand or on a commute. I don't know. I read Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance before he was nominated for the vice presidency. When I first read it, because I was interested in Betty, so I like Googled other books about Appalachia, and this came up. I like a memoir. I wanted to read it. I actually listened to it, and it was, unfortunately, how do I say this? I guess we all hate J.D. Vance here. It was kind of racist and misogynistic, and it was not good. He was a bad writer. He had weird anecdotes. He came to odd conclusions about society and the welfare system and things that are ultimately not productive, and now that he's going to be vice president, are ultimately going to be permanently destructive to the state of my country. So don't mention this around me, because I'm gonna cry. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. This is a book that everyone also has been reading, and I thought it was nice. I was interested in human evolution, you know, monkey becoming man, etc. This was good. I also listened to it while going to the gym. I love an informational audiobook at the gym, we've learned. And yeah, it was good. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by Frank Baum, because I was enjoying Anne of Green Gables, so I wanted to explore a bit more classic middle grade children's books. And this was before Wicked had really, you know, got a chokehold on all of popular consciousness. I would like that stated for the record. And this was pleasant. I enjoyed myself. It was nice. Different from the movie in ways that I could not have predicted. It was silly. The pictures were lovely. I read the last one. This is my next buddy read with my mom. Unfortunately, don't mention this shit around me. I hate this book. I hated every second of this book. The whole thing about the book is that woman goes on cruise ship. Woman falls asleep, woman wakes up, she's the only one on the cruise ship. That's the synopsis. That's what everyone will tell you this book is about. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that on page like 20, she's already found another person. There's already another person there. So she's not alone in the book. And like, soon enough, there's like a handful of people. And then it's silly, it's crazy, you think you're interested, and then the author just makes stupid decision after stupid decision. And the ending is terrible, and I just felt my time was wasted. I felt the marketing was bad. I felt I was lied to. So it's going here, and I'm pissed. I read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I like when a romance is a secondary idea, secondary concept in a book that I can like root for or hate or whatever. I don't really like romance books themselves, but I wanted to challenge myself this year and read one, and I heard good things about this. It's about a woman and a man. They used to date in high school. Something happens. They don't see each other again, but they've been secretly writing about each other in their books. She writes like smutty vampire stuff, and he writes this like dude bro award-winning literary fiction, but they've been kind of talking to each other within the literature, and then they meet and they have a chance to fall in love again, and I ate it up. eating it up the whole time. I really enjoyed them, like kicking my little feet. I was really enjoying it. They were cool characters. It was fun. It was fast. I skipped over the sex scenes because I have Catholic shame, and we're putting it in Miss Congeniality because I had a great time and I would recommend it. I wouldn't put it in runners up. It didn't like profoundly affect me, but I had a nice time. Ooh, I forgot to rank the 6th Anne of Green Gables. We're putting in French fart noise because clearly I forgot about it. I went home to visit my parents and I went to their local library and checked out a bunch of graphic novels. I'm gonna rank those all at the same time. I borrowed A Guest in the House. I read E.M. Carroll's short story collection that I forget the name of, and I thought it was great. And then this really got me. I thought this was amazing. In fact, I'm putting it in runners up because it was so good. It's kind of like Rebecca in the way where it's a woman being haunted by the ghost of her husband's ex. I read Monica by Daniel Clowes. He's known for Ghost World, I think. They made a movie with Steve Buscemi that I don't like because they're so mean to Steve Buscemi in that movie, and I don't like when people are mean to Steve Buscemi. Anyway, he wrote Monica. Monica is so difficult to describe. It's part sci-fi, it's part cult, it's part groovy historical fiction, and I'm also putting it in runners up because I thought it was great. It's like a woman actually go into it completely blind. I couldn't even begin to attempt to explain what it's about. I read Blankets. It's also going in runners up. One of my favorite subgenres is a graphic memoir. I will read a graphic memoir every time. I will love a graphic memoir every time. And Blankets is like the perfect quintessential example of that. I'm a massive fan of Anthony Bourdain. There's a shrine to him in my childhood bedroom. Just like the books I've collected, not like a real, you know. This is Hungry Ghosts that he worked on another artist with, and a series of sort of horror short stories about food. These chefs are telling them after hours, and it was enjoyable. I think that some of them are really scary, some of them are kind of funny. I'm putting it in Miss Congeniality because I liked it, but there's not much to say. I read some non-fiction here about Tiananmen Square. Really could not even tell you what happened in Tiananmen Square before I read this. I think that I'm putting it up here because it was informational. However, it's like really dense and it doesn't really tell the story well. There's large blocks of text, there's lots of names, all the names are similar. So it required a lot of mind power to figure out, and it was not necessarily enjoyable to read because of how it was written. But I'm glad I read it. Radium Girls, the girls who glow in the dark because they worked with radiation in the 1920s. The art style is not like anything I'd read before. Informational, but nice. Miss Congeniality, the classic Miss Congeniality. And then Berlin, which is this massive book about Berlin around World War II, I think. I don't know. All the characters kind of drawn the same. And there were some parts of this book that were really interesting and some that just felt like labor to get through because it was just a lot of characters, a lot of pages, just a lot. But I still liked it because I like that time period. The area is interesting, the art style is cool, it was well written, it was just like too much. I read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. My mom was skeptical about this book, but then because of its emotionally cathartic ending, she rated it really high, recommended it to me, was telling me I should read it for years. I read it and I thought it was fine. I think it was poorly researched. I think that the characters are a little flat. I hate Not Like Other Girls kind of girl protagonist of she's scrappy and she wears pants, but then a boy loves her, and I hate that. And I do love an emotionally cathartic ending. France in World War II is interesting with the Nazi occupation. I just recently went to Paris to see the Liberation Museum. So like, I just don't get how everyone is treasuring this book when I just think that like, it's fine, it's passable, it's French fart noise. Your laptop's taking off over there.
You crashed once already.
Oh, that's not good. I read Kindred by Octavia E. Butler with my mom, and it was our first buddy read that we actually enjoyed. It was like time travel. It's a woman who accidentally keeps time traveling to the antebellum South in Maryland, and has to like save the life of one of her white ancestors. The world and the rules of the time travel were really interesting. I think it was written really well. It made us think a lot about social issues because my mom thinks about the 1970s as a person of color as a time where it didn't feel particularly safe, and that she would hate to time travel back to the 1970s. But the book itself is 1970s saying, you know, how horrifying it would be to go back even further, which I think is interesting. And it's going in runners-up. In fact, it was in my top 10 for a while, but it had to be pushed down because I just read too many good things. I read two great things back to back. I had a great reading summer. I think this is like June, July. I was reading all my favorites at this time. I read Notes on an Execution. This is a book, it's from multiple points of view. It's a man who murdered women and is going to be executed at the end of the day. And his perspective is in second person, so it's you walk down death row, you eat your last meal, you sit in the electric chair, which I think is a really bold and piercing way to attack this issue of the death penalty. And then the book is also narrated by the women that he affected, victims, detectives, family members. It's part of a series of books that I read this year. It's sort of about the idea of violence against women. Alright, we took a short break because the battery died. I'm catching you up on what you missed. I read There right after Notes on an Execution, so I read two of my favorite books back to back. There is, it's the interconnected stories of many different Native Americans living in Oakland. And when you think about the Native American, at least when the average American individual thinks about the Native American, you think about people on horses and on teepees and next to a mountain, and you think about these very rural places. And what There does is center on urban natives and their lives. This book is fiction, but it also acts as like history with these long passages about the history of Native American people in California and America, and it's media criticism about the Native Americans being represented. It's social studies. It's a lot packed into a small novel, and I just think that it's one of the best things that I've read, not only this year but ever. I also put the best American poetry of 2023 in French fart noise because none of the poems really stuck out to me this year, and that's fine. It is what it is. And then I listened to Salman Rushdie read Knife on audio. Salman Rushdie was attacked a few years ago on a stage and he lost his eye from the attack, and this book is about the attack, recovering from the attack, and it's short and it's very interesting. It's the only thing I've read from Rushdie, and I would put that in Miss Congeniality. Next, another great book that goes in my top 10. Are you kidding? This is Demon Copperhead. Researched more on books about Appalachia that I could read, and this came up. It's a recent publication. It's the story of a boy in Appalachia. It's sort of a loose retelling of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, and it criticizes, you know, the foster care system, the opioid crisis, and it's very timely while also being set a few decades ago. And I loved Demon as a character and the people he was surrounded with. I just couldn't get enough of it. I was reading it as a library book on my Kindle, and then I had to rush out and buy it halfway through because I knew I just had to read it with my hands. And I still think about this book, and I think it's an essential text for sort of understanding this area, white poverty, and who these people are and why they are the way they are. I read The English Understand Wool. It was fun. I read an Agatha Christie this year. I typically don't like to buy her books because you only read a mystery once, and I would want to own a book if I'm gonna like reread it. But I thought, oh, this is cool. It's set in the area in which I live in southern France, and I thought it would be interesting. I'll buy it. I know by like the third chapter that it's not gonna be that good. It was just really slow. The mystery wasn't that interesting. You kind of figured it out pretty early on. And then I went and looked at like articles that rank all of her mysteries, and this is usually ranked near the bottom. It's a very early Poirot, so unfortunately it has to go in. That was it, because I expect more from Agatha Christie at this point. I read The Song of Achilles. I'm gonna be very kind about this and just put it in French fart noise because the girlies ride for this novel. They go hard for it, they love it, they cry about it. I personally did not get it. I liked Cersei a decent amount, and that it was sort of entertaining and interesting to see all like the greatest hits of Greek mythology. This, I just didn't like the writing. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like what was happening. I just did not enjoy this one, but I don't think I had a super high expectation going into it, so that's why it's going in this middle category and not in a more negative category. And I read a Star Wars book. I did read a Star Wars book. I like Star Wars. That is an understatement. I used to have these books, like novelizations of the movies as a kid, and I was just doing, I don't know why I was researching like Star Wars books to read, but I found that this novelization of the third movie was incredible and actually sort of in a way saves the prequels. I unironically enjoy the prequels, but I did read this one just to like see what the hype was about, and it was actually really truly excellent. It was so well written. It sort of really got into the details, the political and the emotional and social details of what was happening in Revenge of the Sith. I love these characters. I thought it was super awesome. Will I read another Star Wars book? I don't think so, but I did have a nice time with this, and it's a classic Miss Congeniality. She's nice, she's cute, she can stick around. The Mayor of MacDougal Street, which is the posthumous memoir of Dave Van Ronk, the folk singer. I love a memoir by a musician. I've read a lot of them. I think that's the next video I want to do, is just like talking about and discussing and maybe ranking all of the music memoirs that I've read, because I read a lot of them. And I thought this was great. I really like the folk revival era in like Greenwich Village, New York, 1960s, your Bob Dylan, your Joan Baez, your Dave Van Ronk, Judy Collins, and I had certain preconceived notions about this era and how people felt about it and what people were doing, but this book sort of really altered my perspective. It was a bit more skeptical, it was a bit more realistic, and it didn't over-romanticize this era like a lot of other pieces of literature and film do, which I could really appreciate. Because it covered like pre-revival, I also sort of could set up the dominoes and understand how one piece of music led to another piece of music. I wrote down so many songs I have to listen to, so I really quite enjoyed this, and I found it a very valuable read. I read Wellness by Nathan Hill. I'm not lying when I say this is a book about everything. This author just, like me I suppose, just yaps. He's yapping about everything. Marriage, children, the economy, parental trauma, Kansas, art, and honestly I did eat it up. I think that it was a little too all over the place for me, but ultimately if I hadn't read so many great things it would have made it in my top 10. Just that its scatterbrained mentality sort of kept it from being a true contender in for those top slots. But I do think it was really well written, and there are sections of this book that I still really think about, like the Kansas sections, and I would read a book just about like people in Kansas. I read A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. It's unfortunate, but I have to put it in French fart noise because I expect so much from Hemingway, but he always disappoints me. I thought this is my first piece of like nonfiction Hemingway, and it's his stories of, and it's his like, because diary entries of being in Paris in the early 20th century. You know, you've got your Shakespeare and Company bookstore and your Gertrude Stein and Fitzgerald and all of your, you know, all the celebrities that you know and love, all the icons of that era in such a beautiful place. And I love Paris, and I just thought it was kind of dull, unfortunately. I told myself a few years ago I would give up on Hemingway because I read like 4 or 5, and every time I'm disappointed, and this time I really am going to stop, except for 3 or 4 years from now when I try again and fail. I reread Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I really bonded with my dad over this when I was a kid, so this was sort of feeling homesick and nostalgic, and I read this. I'm putting it in Miss Congeniality. It's a little too silly. I don't want them to be too silly, and it was bits doing too much. Like, you know the later Monty Python movies where they're doing a little too much. You're sort of happy to be there, but it's just a bit too much. But it wasn't stopped, and I do enjoy that. I read Steve Martin's comedy memoir, Born Standing Up. I thought it was great. I thought he was a great writer. I found all of it really interesting. I think he's really funny. I like learning about his stand-up career because I know more from his film catalog, and Only Murders in the Building. I enjoyed it. I recommend it. I feel like a lot of memoirs by celebrities feel like a waste of time, feel kind of masturbatory, but this felt really like intentional, and he did have something to say, and what he said was interesting. Then I ran the book of the year. Everyone's talking about James. Everyone loves James. This is like Percival Everett's like magnum opus, I guess. He's won almost every award. Every bookstore I go into is buy this book. I really like it. It's Jim's perspective in Huckleberry Finn, and I thought it was really great. It was never, for me, a contender of best book of the year. I just thought it was great, and that it was interesting, his perspective and what he had to say and what he did, and I kept going back to Huck Finn and sort of rereading and like putting the pieces together, and I thought it was really enjoyable. Ultimately, it's just not as like mind-blowingly profound as the publishing industry and bookstores like want me to think it is, but I still like it and I still think it's great. So there's that. I read Joan Baez's new poetry book. It's her first collection of poetry. If you see my mother ask her to dance, I'm gonna kindly put this in French fart noise. Oh no, but I love her so much that I feel so bad, because there were some interesting things. I just didn't think the poetry was very good, but she was exploring topics that I didn't know she was like dealing with, like dissociative identity disorder. I didn't know she'd been diagnosed with, and so the poems are like from different personalities and identities. However, I just didn't think that they were like that good. I think her songs are better, and that's really sad to say. I read The Little Prince because I'm trying to read a bit more French literature because I live in France. I guess I didn't know what this was because this was weird and I didn't like it. And I asked every French person I knew, do you like Le Petit Prince? And they all say, no, it's weird. Is that true?
It's true.
He says it's true. So like, why is it a classic? Why are we still publishing it? Why is it a French essential? I don't know. I'm feeling disappointed. I listened to Michelle Obama read Becoming. And this is one that people really like, and it's really well received. She got lots of, flowers and applause for it. I didn't really see what the big deal was because I felt like she didn't reveal enough in this post-White House memoir. I think that she was still kind of holding back. I think there was a looming election, so she was treading lightly. I didn't feel any significant revelation or any significant part of her character was revealed to us, and I just thought it was fine. I think she's a fine writer. I think she's a great speaker. I think she's a nice lady. But I just didn't think it was a big deal. But she is like, it's Miss Congeniality. I mean, Michelle Obama herself is a top 10, but like the book is Miss Congeniality. I Who Have Never Known Men, which is a post-apocalyptic like sci-fi novel about a group of women who have been locked underground for a long time, and they don't know why, and they don't know if anyone else on the planet exists. And that's it. You'd think that like with that synopsis, things would happen, but nothing happens. They sort of just wander in a way that's like, was trying to be philosophically profound, but ultimately was not. For me personally, and I read Crying in H Mart, which is another book that all the girlies love. It's part grief memoir about a woman grieving her mom, and part book about food. She cooks a lot of Korean food in this, discusses Korean food, and I thought that was like really great. I think I'm gonna put it, I haven't really thought about it that much since I finished it, so I'm not sure, but I'm gonna put it in runners up. I read My Dark Vanessa, so another book about like the trials and tribulations of being a woman in this world. It's a book about a woman reflecting on what she believed to be a consensual relationship with her teacher when she was still underage, and that the teacher still continued to groom and abuse students after her, and she's sort of coming to grips with that while also remembering what had happened. And it's a book that attempts to redefine victimhood and victims coming to their own conclusions about how they feel about their experiences. It's about power imbalances, it's about grooming, it's about canceling people on the internet, I guess. And I thought it was fantastic. I also read this book very quickly. I actually found it pretty disturbing. was like, I had to take several breaks to collect myself because it does not stray away from the actions that happened, if you know what I mean. I was bullied into reading Terry Pratchett because I don't really like fantasy, but then there are fantasy things that I do like, and I wanted to try to read some fantasy, so I started with Terry Pratchett because I thought it would be similar to like The Princess Bride, which I do like, both the book and the movie. And this was fun. Miss Congeniality, it was fine. I think like it was kind of silly, goofy, funny in the same way Hitchhiker's Guide is, but they're sort of trying a bit too hard, and there's like 30 books in the series and I'm just not that interested. But I dipped my toe into this kind of fantasy. Maybe I'll try a different kind. Maybe there's something out there that I'll enjoy, but it was fine. And I read it. I read my second Tiffany McDaniel book this year, On the Savage Side. A pair of sisters and a few of their friends live in southern Ohio on a river, and women's bodies appear in the river. Or I guess a more deliberate way of saying it is women's bodies have been dumped in the river by their killers. It's the story of these women and the violence they face. I really had a very high expectation going into this because I loved Betty so much, and that Betty is written with this really nebulous, like majestic kind of writing style, lots of metaphor, lots of imagery, sort of overwritten in a way that plays into the mythology of the book. And I think that writing style used in this book is not as effective. I think that it just felt overly flowery. It just didn't suit that mystical purpose that it did in Betty. So I was sort of getting exhausted of the, extensive and oftentimes insane metaphors that McDaniel chose to use, but I still enjoyed it, sort of. I still found value in it. I'm so glad I read it. So it's going in Miss Congeniality. I read some more poetry. I read 100 Selected Poems by E.E. Cummings. That's gonna be the first poetry that goes in Miss Congeniality because I think I should be reading more poems by just one guy, and that the anthologies might not be for me. I think that E.E. Cummings has it's my first time reading him, and that he has some he makes crazy decisions in writing his poems in a way that was very interesting and made me rethink the structure of poetry. So that was helpful. That was useful. I listened to Stephen Fry read Mythos, which is a collection of most of the Greek myths. I think after Song of Achilles and Circe, I was searching for something more nonfiction, and Stephen Fry did a fantastic job. He writes the stories in a way that is fictional, that it feels like you're reading a fairy tale book and not a historical account of what certain people believed, or these stories and this is this and that is that. It felt really tangible in a way that was really exciting to listen to, and I definitely want to listen to maybe his other books on the subject, and that's going in runners up. It was really great. I was blown away. I read the new book by Tommy Orange, Wandering Stars, and this follows some of the ancestors of the characters featured in They're There, and when that was pitched to me like that, I thought it was going to be a bit more historical, it was going to be a bit more in the 19th century, but it was in the 19th century for a little bit, and then we're in the 20th century, and we're sort of dealing with some of the aftermath of the final events of They're There. So it was nice to see what happened after, but I was sort of looking for a more historical fiction, which is on me, I guess, or maybe it's on the marketing. I still liked it. I still think it was really good. I'm gonna put it in runners up because I do think it was really good and really valuable, and it belongs in a superior category, just not top 10, unfortunately. Okay, now it's around Halloween at this time, and I read a lot of horror type stuff. I read The Fall of the House of Usher and Other Short Stories by Edgar Allan Poe. Poe is significant to my childhood. Around the age of 11 or 12, I really got into Edgar Allan Poe, so returning to some of these stories was really fun. Ultimately, I'm going to give him Miss Congeniality. I read Autumn by Ali Smith because it was autumn. French fart noise. I didn't get the point. I thought it was incredibly boring. I thought I was going to have a great time reading the whole quartet of these novels, but I really hated this fucking first one. In fact, I'm putting it in, that was it, because I really feel like I just see these books advertised all the time, and they have the featured places on shelves in bookstores that I was expecting more. I couldn't even tell you what this is about. Again, it's just kind of wandering, and I love a good wander. I love a book that's kind of about nothing but thinking, except sometimes it just feels inconsequential. And here it felt inconsequential. Maybe I'm not British and it dealt with a lot with Brexit, so maybe that's it, but I don't know, I just didn't care. This is Northwoods by Daniel Mason. It is the story of one house over a period of like 300 to 400 years and all the people who lived in it. And I had this idea for a book, this exact idea. I don't know, I was like 17, but I was 17, so I'm not gonna write, you know, this huge ambitious novel. So it's really great that like, hey, somebody else had the same idea and they did it in such the perfect way that I don't think the idea needs to be attempted again. Because I thought it was so great with, you know, it aligns with American history, but not all of the cliched typical beats of American history. Like, you don't have to hear about Pearl Harbor, you don't have to hear about Abraham Lincoln, you don't have to hear about this, that, or the other. It's following American history in a more organic, everyday, small town kind of way, rather than like a Forrest Gump, let's hit all the major plot points, the major beats of history kind of way. And the characters were really interesting. I was so moved by each individual section that when those people left and new people came in, I felt sad. Like, no, but I want to keep going with them, but then I'd fall in love with these new people, and sort of that vicious cycle. So I really loved this book. Continuing on with my October reads, I read Songs of a Dead Dreamer. I saw this book somewhere and wrote it down. It was like, what a crazy cover, I must read it. These horror stories were insanely good. They were really excellent. I mean, the first one, I'm like reading it on the train to work, and I'm shaking in my boots on the train. And it's not often I get like horrified by like horror because it's like fake, but these were so well written and made me feel like I was reading Twilight Zone episodes, which is a great feeling. I love the Twilight Zone, so if you like that show, this book is really excellent. Because it's a short story collection, not every story is going to be a winner, so I can't put it too far up. So it's going in Miss Congeniality. I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Disappointed. That was it. I felt like I was so excited to finally read it because I've been wanting to read it around Halloween for years, and I finally get to it, and it's a dud. Like, it's not that interesting. Maybe I'll watch the movie and I'll get the hype, but I read it and I closed the book and I really felt like, was that it? Is that what everyone's been like crazy about for like 90 years? That's it? I just thought it was going to be spookier and crazier, but it was really not, unfortunately. I read Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. This is fun. It was like also sort of like a Twilight Zone episode or even a Goosebumps episode, following these kids and a haunted circus comes in town. There's this I won't spoil it, actually. I think that part of the fun is discovering as you go. So I thought it was a fun little Halloween read. Miss Congeniality. I read The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I fear that this is also disappointing. I also closed the book and felt that was it. That was it. Like, again, so many readers and so much of pop culture has been clamoring around this book, and you know, it's a father and son just in this post-apocalyptic world, just wandering around, and I thought that would be interesting, sort of like in a Last of Us kind of style, but really they didn't do much, and it was a really bleak ending, and I like a bleak ending, but this just felt bleak without much purpose, without much interest. So maybe I'll try Cormac McCarthy again, but I fear I'm not on the bandwagon for this one. And the last book I read in that Halloween season was Monstrilio, which is a weird book to describe. I also read this because of Books in Lala, and this one was a win, where a woman, her son dies, she cuts off a piece of his lung as a souvenir, and then the lung grows into a monster. They try to make the monster into a boy, and insanity ensues. And I just thought, I mean, you never knew what was going to happen next, and you really started to care for this like little monster guy. So it was heartwarming in a really disturbed way, which is sort of my taste, I think. So I'm gonna put that in runners up because I just don't, it doesn't quite make it into the top 10. Okay, I've been avoiding talking about it because I don't want to complain too much, but this is the last book my mom and I read together as a buddy read, and it's The Women by Kristen Hanna. Because we both read The Nightingale, we thought, oh, we'll go into this book. Maybe it'll be interesting. We weren't expecting much, just like sort of mommy book club beach read, emotionally cathartic ending. It's about nurses during the Vietnam War. And unfortunately, I think it's one of the worst things I've ever read. I think that it's so laughably bad that I make a full circle into being angry again. That the characters were flat. I mean, it's called The Women, but the protagonist seeks really only relationships with men. That the crux of this book, the core of the book, is her relationship with a few different men. Her female friends are totally flat and not interesting. I think Kristen Hanna also poorly researched this book. The girl is really whiny. I think that there was some parts in this that were kind of disturbing in a way that they were so poorly researched, and she was skipping over such significant events in history that felt kind of insulting to the material and to these women who actually went through this. And I'm getting so heated and I'm falling over my words because it would take 30 minutes for me to fully describe to you everything I hated about this thing. And so really, you don't want to mention this around me or I'm going to explode. And I could make a 20-30 minute video discussing it. I just don't know if that would be good for my mental health. Let me know if you want to see that. Alright, we're nearing the end here. I've got Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I read that in November, and that's going to be our 10th book in the top 10 list. I just loved this. I wasn't expecting it to be so moved by it, but it's sort of a critique on true crime by fictionalizing the last couple of weeks of Ted Bundy's life, where he broke into a sorority and murdered several girls, and the police escapades happening, and it really focuses on the women, the perspectives of the women. And I think the most interesting thing about this book is that it critiques the legacy of Ted Bundy, and he's not even named in this book. The killer is always just called a defendant. That Ted Bundy's legacy is that he's this maniacal genius, he's this evil genius, he escaped prison twice, he's so smart, he defended himself in court, when really, like, he was kind of an idiot. The police just built him up into this maniacal character in order to bring attention away from their own negligence and wrongdoing. And this book did keep me up at night. This book did scare me. It scared me a lot, but in a way that was psychologically profound. I want to be spooked, but I want to be thinking about why I'm spooked. And I think that's part of my reading taste, I suppose. So we have 2 more books left. I didn't read much at the end of the year because I was busy traveling. I read one more classic middle grade, and that's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Miss Congeniality, of course. It was really fun, really nice, really nostalgic. I mean, Santa Claus is a character in this book, which is just so pleasant. It is just so nice. And I love the drawings. I think I want to read the whole series next year. But that was just sort of a nice little brain break after Bright Young Women. The last book I read this year was Beneath the Underdog by Charles Mingus. Charles Mingus was the great jazz bassist, and this memoir was interesting. I think it was written in a really interesting way. So he has this way of thinking about himself where he is sort of 3 people. He's got one in the middle, unmoved, and he's got one that is always attacking, so afraid, and this third one is always trying to love and trust. So his memoir is sort of written in the third person about himself, and sometimes the other personalities will chime in first person, which is really interesting. I think he's a really great writer. I think he wrote this alongside someone else, but his just really volcanic personality, his really volatile personality comes to light in the writing of this. However, I do think he did talk about every woman he ever had sex with. And that's something about male memoirs that I really dislike. I don't need to know about every girl that you have ever touched. It's like, can we skip over some of it? But it's really so erotic in a way that just felt egregious. And I don't think that, I think a large part of this could have been cut if we cut out all of the sex in it. So I'm gonna put it in Miss Congeniality because I do think it was really good and valuable read, but I could have used an editor, you know, a post-Me Too editor, I think. All right, so now this is what I've ranked. My least favorite books of the year were Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, The Memory Police, Hillbilly Elegy, The Last One, and The Women, and my top 10, which I'm gonna put in an order here. Okay, so from 10 to 1, these were my favorite books of the year. Number 10 was Anne of Green Gables. Number 9, Educated. 8, Northwoods. 7, There There. 6, Notes on an Execution. 5, Demon Copperhead. 4, Bright Young Women. 3, My Dark Vanessa. 2, Great Circle. 1, Betty. That's a great list. That's a really great list. I'm really happy with everything that we've done here today, everything we've accomplished. You've been a great collaborator. I don't know how to end this. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that you found this at least slightly interesting. Maybe you got a few book recommendations out of it. And I'm excited for this new year of reading. I'm already reading something that I'm loving and might make it on next year's top 10. You can subscribe if you want to. You can like it if you want to. If you're gonna leave a comment, be nice to me or I'll cry. And that's it. Goodness. Okay, bye. Okay, bye.